The library of St. Agatha's Academy exuded an air of ancient wisdom, its shelves laden with books that whispered secrets of times long forgotten. Natalie, the solitary figure hunched over a weathered tome, felt a sense of comfort in the musty embrace of knowledge. As the twilight sun cast long shadows across the room, she found herself drawn to the ornate mirror mounted on the far wall, a relic of a bygone era, its gilded frame tarnished with age. With a curious glance, Natalie tore her gaze away from the faded pages and towards her reflection in the mirror. At first, nothing seemed amiss. The image staring back at her was the same as it always was, her features bathed in the soft glow of candlelight. But then, she saw it, a flicker of movement in the corner of her eye, so fleeting that she almost missed it. Heart pounding, Natalie leaned in closer, her breath fogging the glass as she searched for any sign of life within the stillness. And then, she heard it. A whisper, barely audible, yet unmistakably real, echoing through the empty corridors of her mind.
Come closer.
It seemed to beckon, its words dancing on the edge of her consciousness like shadows in the night. Tentatively, Natalie reached out a trembling hand, her fingers grazing the cold surface of the mirror. To her surprise, the glass seemed to ripple beneath her touch, distorting her reflection into strange and twisted shapes. With a gasp, she jerked her hand back, her heart racing as she watched in horror as her reflection returned to normal, as if nothing had happened yet. But the whispers persisted, growing louder with each passing moment until they filled the air with their haunting melody. Natalie's pulse quickened, her mind awash with a flood of questions and doubts. Was she losing her sanity, or was there something more sinister at play? With a sense of trepidation, Natalie tore herself away from the mirror's hypnotic gaze, her footsteps echoing through the silent library like the tolling of a funeral bell. As she made her way towards the exit, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched, that unseen eyes followed her every move with a hunger that bordered on obsession. And as she stepped out into the fading light of the evening, Natalie couldn't help but wonder what other secrets lay hidden within the walls of St. Agatha's Academy, waiting to be uncovered by those brave enough to seek them out. In the dead of night, when the moon hangs like a pale spectre in the sky, Natalie finds herself drawn once more to the mirror that has become both her sanctuary and her prison. The library lies shrouded in darkness, its rows of books looming like silent sentinels in the gloom. With each hesitant step, the air grows colder, thick with a sense of foreboding that clings to her skin like a shroud. Approaching the mirror, Natalie's reflection stares back at her with hollow eyes, its expression mirroring her own sense of unease. As she reaches out to touch the glass, a sudden chill races down her spine, sending a shiver through her body. And then, without warning, the world around her dissolves into darkness, leaving her standing alone in the midst of a desolate wasteland. Above, the sky hangs heavy and low, suffused with an eerie crimson glow that casts the world below in a sickly pallor. The air is thick with the acrid scent of smoke, and the ground trembles beneath Natalie's feet as if writhing in agony. In the distance, dark shapes move with unnatural grace, their forms obscured by the shifting shadows. Natalie watches in horror as the landscape twists and contorts before her eyes, morphing into grotesque shapes that defy all logic and reason. Mountains rise and fall like waves on a storm-tossed sea, their jagged peaks scraping against the blood-red sky. Rivers of molten lava snake through the barren landscape, their fiery tongues licking at the ashen earth below. But it is not just the world itself that seems to be unraveling before Natalie's eyes. It is reality itself. Time bends and warps, folding in on itself like a tattered scrap of paper, and Natalie is swept along in its inexorable tide. Images flicker and dance at the edges of her vision, fleeting glimpses of a past that seems both familiar and alien. And through it all, the whispers persist, their voices a constant drone in the back of Natalie's mind. They speak of unspeakable horrors, of ancient evils that lie dormant beneath the surface of the world, waiting to be unleashed upon an unsuspecting populace. And as Natalie listens, she realizes with a sinking heart that she's not just a spectator in this twisted nightmare. She's a participant, bound by forces beyond her comprehension. With a cry of despair, Natalie reaches out to touch the mirror once more, desperate to escape the hellish landscape that surrounds her. but the glass remains cold and unyielding beneath her fingertips, trapping her in a prison of her own making. And as the whispers grow louder, their words echoing through her mind like a chorus of the damned, Natalie knows that she is running out of time. In the dead of night, Natalie sits alone in her dimly lit dorm room, the soft glow of her desk lamp casting long shadows across the walls. The silence of the academy is oppressive, broken only by the rhythmic ticking of the antique clock on her bedside table. Her hands tremble as she reaches out to touch the mirror that hangs above her dresser, its surface cool to the touch. As her fingers make contact with the glass, a shiver runs down her spine, sending goosebumps racing across her skin. The mirror seems to ripple beneath her touch, its surface distorting like a pool of water disturbed by a stone. For a moment Natalie hesitates, her heart pounding in her chest, but then she steels herself and presses on. With a sudden surge of courage, she leans in close, her breath fogging the glass as she peers into her own reflection. But what she sees staring back at her is not her own familiar face. It is a twisted caricature, a grotesque mockery of the image she knows so well. Her features contort and shift, morphing into monstrous shapes that seem to writhe and squirm beneath the surface. A scream rises in Natalie's throat, but she forces it down, her eyes wide with terror as she watches in horror. The whispers begin anew, their voices a sinister chorus that seems to emanate from the very depths of her own mind.
You cannot escape.
They taunt, their words like daggers in her soul.
We are everywhere and nowhere, all at once.
The moon hung low in the sky, casting a silvery glow over the ivy-covered walls of St. Agatha's Academy, as Natalie found herself wandering the deserted corridors, her footsteps echoing softly against the cold stone floors. The events of the past few days weighed heavily on her mind, the whispers from the mirror haunting her every waking moment. She needed answers, and there was only one person who might be able to provide them. Desperate for answers, Natalie turns to Professor Blackwood, hoping against hope that he can make sense of the madness that now consumes her. Descending a narrow staircase, Natalie found herself standing before the heavy oak door of Professor Marcus Blackwood's private study. The door loomed before her, like a portal to another world, its polished surface gleaming in the dim light. But as she approaches his office, a sense of dread settles over her like a suffocating blanket, and she hesitates, her hand hovering uncertainly over the doorknob. With a trembling hand, she raised it to knock, her heart hammering in her chest. A moment passed before the door swung open, revealing the figure of Professor Blackwood standing on the threshold, his piercing gaze fixed on Natalie with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. He greeted her with a warm smile, though there was something about the way his lips curved upward that seemed almost predatory.
Professor?
Natalie begins, her voice barely above a whisper.
I need your help. I don't know what's happening to me, but I fear I'm losing my grip on reality.
At the sound of her voice, Professor Blackwood turns to face her, his eyes gleaming in the darkness.
Ah, Natalie,
he says with a smile that sends a shiver down her spine.
I've been expecting you.
Natalie hesitated, unsure of how to begin. She had always found Professor Blackwood to be charming and erudite, but now, in the dim light of his study, there was something about him that set her on edge. She cleared her throat, forcing herself to meet his gaze head-on.
I've been experiencing some strange things,
she began, her voice barely above a whisper.
Whispers, coming from my reflections. Visions, too, of another world. I don't know what to make of it, Professor.
Professor Blackwood's smile widened, though there was a glint of something else lurking behind his eyes.
Ah, yes,
he said, his voice low and conspiratorial.
the reflection. A fascinating phenomenon, wouldn't you agree? It has been known to affect certain sensitive individuals in peculiar ways.
Natalie frowned, her brow furrowing in confusion.
What do you mean a phenomenon?
She asked, her voice tinged with apprehension. The professor's smile never wavered as he crossed the room to stand before the ornate mirror that hung on the far wall.
"You see, my dear Natalie,"
he said, his reflection staring back at him with an intensity that sent a chill down her spine.
"Mirrors have long been believed to be windows into other worlds, gateways to realms beyond our own. Some say they can even reveal hidden truths about those who dare to peer into their depths."
Natalie's eyes widened in disbelief as she watched Professor Blackwood's reflection reach out to touch the surface of the mirror, his fingertips grazing the glass with a reverence that bordered on obsession.
But how is that possible?
She stammered, her mind reeling with the implications of his words. The professor turned to face her, his eyes burning with an intensity that made her feel as though she were being stripped bare.
"That, my dear Natalie,"
he said, his voice barely more than a whisper,
"is a question that has plagued scholars for centuries. But perhaps, if you're willing to delve deeper into the mysteries of the mirror, we might uncover the truth together."
With those ominous words hanging in the air, Professor Blackwood gestured for Natalie to approach the mirror, its surface shimmering in the dim light like a pool of liquid mercury. Trembling, she stepped forward, her reflection staring back at her with an intensity that sent a shiver down her spine. And as she reached out to touch the glass, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was about to embark on a journey from which there would be no return. As Natalie drifted into a fitful slumber, the sky above her twisted into a surreal shade of crimson, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. Dark, ominous objects materialized in the heavens, swirling ominously as if heralding an impending storm. Suddenly, the tranquility of the night shattered as heavy rain began to pelt down, the droplets like icy daggers against Natalie's skin. Tremors rippled through the earth, causing buildings to sway and buckle, their foundations crumbling beneath the relentless onslaught. Panic gripped Natalie as she watched in horror as the world around her descended into chaos, her screams lost amidst the cacophony of destruction. Amidst the chaos, the ground beneath Natalie's feet began to tremble violently, sending shockwaves rippling through the earth. Natalie stumbled through the chaos, her heart pounding in her chest as she witnessed buildings crumble and streets erupt in chaos. She clutched at nearby debris for support, her breath catching in her throat as the world around her seemed to collapse in on itself. A figure emerged from the shadows, its form obscured by the swirling mists of Natalie's dream, its eyes burning with an otherworldly intensity. With a voice like thunder, it spoke directly to her, its words that echoed through her very soul, resonating with an otherworldly power.
"Natalie,
It intoned, its voice both commanding and chilling.
we are coming for you. You cannot escape us."
Natalie's heart raced with terror as she struggled to comprehend the meaning behind the figure's ominous warning of its impending arrival and the devastation it would bring. Desperate to awaken from the nightmare, she pleaded for release, her voice drowned out by the howling winds and crashing waves. With a jolt, Natalie's eyes snapped open, her body drenched in a cold sweat as she gasped for breath. Frantic and disoriented, she scanned her surroundings, relief flooding her as she was half expecting to see the ominous figure lurking in the shadows. But the memory of the dream lingered sending shivers down her spine. Was it just a dream, or a premonition of things to come? In the depths of her subconscious, she knew that the dark figure's warning was all too real, and that their arrival was imminent. As Natalie's grip on reality slowly comes back, she was met with the harsh glare of fluorescent lights above. Panic surged through her veins as she attempted to sit up, only to find herself tightly bound in a straitjacket, her movements restricted. Confusion and fear washed over her as she frantically scanned herself, her heart pounding in her chest. It dawned on her with chilling clarity that she was trapped in a chair, at the mercy of unknown forces, her nightmare bleeding into reality with terrifying consequences. In the suffocating darkness of her confinement, Natalie's mind becomes a battleground between reality and delusion. She awakens to find herself ensnared in the icy embrace of a straitjacket, its constricting fabric a cruel reminder of her shattered sanity. The walls of her cell seem to close in around her, their sterile surfaces devoid of warmth or solace. A single flickering bulb casts long shadows across the room, distorting the contours of reality and plunging Natalie deeper into the abyss of her own mind. As she struggles against her restraints, memories of the mirror flood her senses, a kaleidoscope of twisted images and haunting whispers that threaten to consume her from within. She recalls the sensation of her reflection shifting and contorting, its mocking laughter echoing through the corridors of her fractured psyche. Each whispered promise had been a dagger plunged into her soul, carving away at the fragile facade of her sanity until there was nothing left but darkness. But even now, as Natalie's world crumbles around her, she cannot shake the feeling that she is being watched. The air is thick with a palpable sense of malevolence, as if unseen eyes linger in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. She strains against her bindings, desperate to break free from the prison of her own mind, but the straps hold firm, their cold embrace a grim testament to her captivity. And then, just as hope begins to flicker and fade, a voice cuts through the silence, a voice she knows all too well.
Do you see now, Natalie?
It whispers, its words dripping with malice.
Do you see the truth that lies beyond the mirror?
Natalie's breath catches in her throat as she realizes the source of the voice, the reflection that taunted her, mocked her, and haunted her every waking moment. It hovers before her now, its eyes twin pools of endless darkness, its lips curled into a sinister smile. With a surge of adrenaline, Natalie lungers forward, her teeth gnawing for purchase on the devilish reflection of her own face. But instead of cold glass, her mouth meets only empty air, and she recoils in horror as the reflection fades into nothingness, leaving her alone in the room built for restraint once more. The realization hits her like a physical blow. There is no escape, no reprieve from the nightmare that has become her reality. As the minutes stretch into hours, Natalie's mind becomes a maelstrom of fear and uncertainty. She is adrift in a sea of madness, with no beacon to guide her home. And as the whispers grow louder, their words a symphony of despair, Natalie closes her eyes and surrenders to the darkness, knowing that she may never find her way back to the light. Meanwhile, close by, Professor Blackwood stood beside his colleague, Dr. Jacobs, peering through the double-sided mirror into the observation room where Natalie sat restrained in the chair for her own protection. The room was silent, except for the soft hum of the fluorescent lights overhead, casting an eerie glow over the scene before them.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
Blackwood remarked, his voice tinged with a hint of excitement.
The visions and voices she's experiencing are unlike anything we've ever encountered before. It's truly remarkable, isn't it?
Blackwood murmured, his voice barely above a whisper as he studied Natalie's demeanor.
The extent of her experiences surpasses anything we've encountered in our research thus far.
Dr. Jacobs nodded solemnly, his expression reflecting a mixture of fascination and concern.
Indeed, Professor, but we must proceed with caution,
he replied, his tone tinged with apprehension.
There's no telling what kind of impact these visions and voices could have on her mental state.
Blackwood regarded Jacobs with a thoughtful expression, before turning his attention back to Natalie.
Agreed, Dr. Jacobs. However, I believe that Natalie may hold the key to unlocking the mysteries of these otherworldly beings,
he said, his voice tinged with a sense of urgency.
Our research with her could prove invaluable in preparing humanity for their inevitable arrival.
As they spoke, Natalie remained in a trance-like state, her eyes staring blankly ahead as if seeing something beyond the confines of the room. Unaware of the gravity of her situation, she seemed to be lost in a world of her own making. Blackwood and Jacobs exchanged a meaningful glance, silently acknowledging the weight of their responsibilities. They knew that their work with Natalie was not just a scientific endeavor, but a matter of utmost importance for the future of humanity. Suddenly, a shiver ran down Blackwood's spine as he noticed a subtle shift in the atmosphere. Glancing out the window, his eyes widened in disbelief as he beheld a sight that sent chills down his spine. The sky, once a tranquil blue, had begun to darken and churn, taking on a deep shade of crimson, as if reflecting the fires of hell itself. Jacobs followed Blackwood's gaze, his breath catching in his throat as he took in the ominous sight.
This can't be happening.
he stammered, his voice barely audible above the rising panic in the room. But as they stood transfixed by the eerie spectacle unfolding before them, Natalie remained oblivious to the impending danger lurking just beyond the horizon. And as the sky continued to darken, casting a foreboding shadow over the world, the realization dawned on Blackwood and Jacobs that their research with Natalie had brought them closer to the brink of an unimaginable catastrophe.